Eita. Boa noite, Esther. Boa noite, Ana. Luiz. Guys, my ring light just decided to die on me. O ring light acabou de pifar. Estou tentando consertar. But you can see me clearly, right? Hi, Esther, can you hear me? Hello, Bruno, can you hear me? Oh, hey,
Yep.
Esther. Good. I was just apologizing here because my ring light was on when I logged in, and now it just died on me. But it's okay. I think the view is clear enough, right?
No, the view is clear. I'm listening you very well. I
Good,
think we
good.
can start.
Good. So I guess we'll start. Let's start then. I will begin by branches of government. So let's go here. So guys, today we're going to talk about the judiciary, both the Brazilian and the US judiciary. Since our time is limited, I might have to speak only about the federal judiciary, but the federal courts structure. But I have sent you also material from the state court structure. Ou seja, a gente vai focar na Justiça Federal, americana e brasileira. Se o tempo permitir, a gente também fala um pouco sobre a Justiça Estadual. But I want to talk to you first about the branches of government. So I was very concerned this week because as I was scrolling down through Instagram, I came across an English teacher, an English legal teacher. I'm sorry, a legal English teacher. I'm so sorry. I came across a legal English teacher who made the type of mistake that we should be very careful about, which is literal translations. Even if you've heard a term before, and you might think it's correct, always double check, okay? Because just as in Portuguese, the way we have some words that acquire a different meaning within a legal context, for example, tombar, tombamento, the same thing happens in English. And she was basically referring to the branches of government, which are judicial branch, the judicial branch or judiciary, o judiciário, or the executive branch, poder executivo, and the legislative branch, poder legislativo. Let's continue with some other words. So branch, ramo, or within a legal context, o poder executivo, o poder legislativo, o poder judiciário. Now, when we go back all the way back to Montesquieu, it's true that he spoke about the separation of powers, the doctrine of the separation of powers, teoria da separação dos poderes. However, we have to be careful because nowadays when you're talking about structure, the spheres of government, you use the word branch. So again, let's practice the pronunciation. Judicial branch, executive. So the X, você pode falar assim como um Gzinho, né? Eu vou aumentar aqui. I'm going to increase the size so you can see the spelling a little bit better. So executive branch, and then legislative branch. So be careful with that word power. You do not want to associate the word power with poder executivo, poder legislativo, poder judiciário, okay? We should be very careful because actually power can mean competência, okay? Competência can be expressed in legal English in two ways. Jurisdiction, or power. So if you're talking about legislative power, you're actually talking about poder de legislar, ou a competência, a competência legislativa. I didn't, and then as we were talking about the doctrine of the separation of powers, we should also talk about, the checks and balances, sistema de freios e contrapesos. Here I'm attaching an interesting web page that you can check out later. Let me open it up for you. It's a governmental, the US, governmental webpage, and it talks about the branches of the US government. Learn about the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the United States government, the US government. So, separation of powers is a doctrine of constitutional law, que seria direito constitucional, under which the three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, are kept separate. You certainly recall Montesquieu's doctrine of the separation of powers, known in Portuguese as Teoria da Separação dos Poderes. This doctrine asserts, affirms, says that the executive, legislative, and judicial functions of a government must be separate yet equal, operating within a system of checks and balances. So here I give you a little tip. When you think of poder executivo, poder legislativo, poder judiciário, think of a tree. A tree has many branches, os seus ramos, os seus galhos. This way, I think you won't forget that when you talk about poder executivo, poder legislativo, poder judiciário, you're talking about branches. Okay, good. So if you learn this today, it's already, I already think you have learned something important, because this is a very common mistake that people make. Okay, last time, before we proceed to talking about the court structure itself, we were discussing a little bit about the common law system and some of its features. And we need to talk about binding precedents. Let me, here, I found it finally. And I'm not sure if everybody was here for last class. Let's do a very quick review. So a legal system is sistema jurídico, né? Legal system, sistema jurídico. Now, common law, just one second, because I got lost here a little bit. Okay, here you go, sistema jurídico. Common law, o sistema jurídico originário da Inglaterra, que foi adotado por suas ex-colônias. And then a major difference between a civil law system, sistema romano-germânico, and the common law system is the definition of law itself and the words that can be used to mean law. So law, of course, lei, right? However, if you want to make clear when you're talking to someone from a common law country that you are talking about lei promulgada pelo Poder Legislativo, you should use the word statute or act. Statute or act, or statutory law, right? Another word for a precedent is case law or judge-made law. And these are also law in a common law system. So they are also law. São lei no sistema jurídico do common law. Okay? And we spoke about customs, costumes, principles, princípios, and we spoke about the precedents. So binding, vinculante. Legally binding, juridicamente vinculante. So a binding precedent, precedente vinculante. And finally, civil law. Do you recall what I meant about civil law? Two meanings. The first one, sistema romano-germânico, sistema jurídico romano-germânico. And second, civil law, direito civil. So here, just, the pronunciation of some words. Crucial, crucial. And then a false friend, also very important. If you come out of this class knowing this word, I will be very happy. Because even though it's not a legal term per se, it's a term that can cause a lot of confusion. Comprehensive, comprehensive. Comprehensive means completo, englobante, abrangente. And then the word throughout. Por todo o percurso, por todo o tempo, throughout. Durante todo, por todo. Okay? So, basically, these distinct legal systems, common law and civil law systems, not only influence the practice of law, as we were talking about last class, but also add cultural and technical dimensions to the study of legal English. It is crucial to keep in mind this comprehensive approach throughout your legal English studies. So, comprehensive, abrangente. So here, I guess I'm giving you pointers, uns indicadores, né? Umas dicas of how to approach your legal English study. Be aware of literal translations, not good. Always check, always check. Always try to find an American source or British source of information. Number two, make sure that you understand that we are comparing not only two different languages, but two different systems. So sometimes we have to be aware that we are, there's some adaptation. We can compare, but always keeping in mind that very often a very straightforward, simplistic translation will not be able to give you the full picture. Just a very brief exercise. I'll give you a second to fill out this exercise and I'll correct it with you. So here are the words: judge-made law, civil law, case law, and common law. So let's do the first one. What type of system, legal system, might we be talking about? Laws are typically codified, and comprehensive codes outline legal principles and procedures. That sounds a lot like our legal system, right? With codes, comprehensive codes. So I would say in a civil law system. Now, the second one, the other type of legal system we've been studying would definitely be the common law system. So in a common law system, Judges play a significant role é papel, in shaping the law through their decisions in individual cases, which are also known as... Então, os precedentes, quais são as duas maneiras de expressar a lei que é feita através de precedentes? Judge-made law, que não é pejorativo, tá? Judge-made law and case law. Good. If we have time, we'll review our procedural terms. But for now, let's move on to precedents. So, I sent you a PDF called I'm sorry. I sent you a PDF. Let me see the name again. Stare decisis doctrine. And it is in substitution for the common law document. Acho melhor eu explicar em inglês. Eu tinha enviado para vocês um PDF sobre common law. A página que fala sobre stare decisis, eu fiz umas revisões, tá? Então, eu mandei também para vocês um outro PDF, eu mandei para a Esther, não sei se ela já teve tempo, porque eu mandei faz pouco tempo, mas eu tenho certeza que em breve ela vai mandar. Esse documento chamado Stare Decisis. Então, ele é em substituição a essa página aqui, a página número 5 do documento Common Law, tá bem? So, let's read together what stare decisis is. The doctrine of stare decisis, which means to stand by things decided in Latin, is an essential legal principle that promotes consistency and legal certainty. So here we have a couple words that I want to talk about. Legal certainty. Legal certainty, segurança jurídica. Legal certainty, segurança jurídica. Stare decisis is the doctrine that courts will adhere to a precedent in making their decisions. It means to stand by things decided in Latin. When a court faces a legal argument, argumento jurídico, legal argument, if a previous court has ruled on the same or a closely related issue, then the court will make their decision in alignment with the previous court's decision. Entretanto, tem pulo do gato aí. The previous deciding court must have binding authority. So, binding authority meaning a binding authority. Tá me dando um branco, gente, desculpa. Binding authority meaning autoridade vinculante. Or otherwise, it is merely a persuasive authority. So, who has binding authority over whom? So, who has binding authority over whom? Let's check. E aqui é um pouquinho diferente do Brasil, tá? Ou, na verdade, bastante diferente. So, binding precedents, precedentes vinculantes. The number one... só um instantinho que eu estou checando o chat aqui para ver se chegou alguma coisa para mim. Não. So, the number one characteristic of binding precedents, they are hierarchy-based. So, a precedent will be binding if it comes from a higher court, okay? So, a decision from a lower court will not be binding on a higher court or on a court of the same level. Então, uma decisão de primeira instância não é vinculante a uma outra decisão de primeira instância. It has to come from a higher court, de uma instância superior. And it is not created by repetition. 5 lower courts deciding the same way do not create a binding precedent, okay? And then there is a difference between the state court system and the federal court system in the US. So decisions from a state's higher courts are binding on the same state's lower courts. So for example, if a and in the US, by the way, state courts, the state court system has Supreme Courts. Há Suprema Cortes estaduais nos Estados Unidos, tá? Na Justiça Estadual Americana, há Suprema Corte. So, decisions from higher courts in a state will be binding within that state, ou seja, dentro do sistema estadual do mesmo estado. As decisões são vinculantes, das cortes superiores às cortes inferiores. However, a decision by Maryland Supreme Court or Texas Supreme Court will not be binding on each other, okay? But they can be used as persuasive authority. They can be used as persuasive authority. Now, if precedents come from a federal court, state courts, they are binding on state courts only and only if they come from the Supreme Court of the United States. If they come from other federal courts, they can be used as persuasive authority, but they will not be binding. Only precedents from the Supreme Court of the United States will be binding on state courts. Now, within the federal court system, obviously precedents from the Supreme Court will be binding. And by that I mean the US Supreme Court. And then, Court of Appeals, como a gente ainda vai ver a estrutura da Justiça Federal, but Court of Appeals, que seriam os TRFs, they are binding on district courts. Então, são vinculantes à primeira instância, dentro do seu próprio circuit, dentro da sua própria região, ok? Então, fazendo uma comparação, dentro da mesma região, são vinculantes, os precedentes são vinculantes, dos TRFs, mas não entre uma região e a outra região. Ficou claro, gente? Do you have any questions regarding that? And let me check the chat. Nothing is coming to me, so I think we are okay, right? Okay, let's continue. So finally, now that we know what a binding precedent is and how they are, sem dúvidas, great, okay, very good. Now that we know what a binding precedent is and how they differ from binding precedents in Brazil, let's move on to court structure itself. So here we go, court structure. So just have to find, here I am. So guys, first thing, I want to show you these pictures here. What do you see? Oh, probably you see this. What do you see on your screens? To the left, we see the Brazilian Supreme Court, and then we have the US Supreme Court as well. We can talk about headquarters, right? The headquarters, a sede. And filial, como diríamos filial? Aí não no caso do Supremo Tribunal Federal, but in terms of like, because in corporate law or in business law, you have headquarters, right? Uma companhia tem os seus headquarters, mas também tem as suas filiais. How would we say filial? And why am I asking this question? Because it's the same word we saw at the beginning of class, branch. Então, headquarters, sede, branch, filial, tá? Another way, another setting for the word branch. So if we are not talking about a legal setting, the word branch can mean galho de árvore ou filial. Okay, good. Let's move on. So, let's practice once again the words. So judicial, branch, judiciary, executive branch, legislative branch. And then, since we are going to be analyzing the structure of the judiciary or the judicial branch, we're going to be talking about lower courts, higher courts, and then highest court, última instância. So, lower court, also known as trial court or first instance court. Higher court, also known as appellate. Appellate. Can you repeat after me, please? Appellate court. Appellate court. Or second instance, segunda instância. And highest court, usually, if we are talking about the federal court system, it would be the Supreme Court, or it can also be referred to as court of last resort. Court of last resort. Ou seja, a quem você recorre por último, né? Court of last resort. So, while both Brazil and the US are federal republics, US federalism exhibits a notably greater degree of decentralization compared to Brazil's. We know that the US is a less centralized country as far as the power of federal government when compared to Brazil. In the US, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches exhibit a lesser degree of federal control than their Brazilian counterparts, os seus equivalentes, than their Brazilian counterparts. With this in mind, let's compare the court structures in Brazil and in the US. So, the US federal court system. So, federal courts, Justiça Federal. Court of Appeal, and District Court. So, na primeira instância, we have district courts. That's what they are called. They are trial courts because that's where you're going to analyze matters of fact and matters of law. Questions of matters, it's better to use the word matter of fact and matter of law. And then you have courts of appeal. And finally, you have the Supreme Court. Now here, if you click here, you are going to find a very, very interesting webpage. I urge you to explore it. This is the official United States Courts webpage. And you have so much information here. You have vocabulary lists, you have, explanation about the court structures, about judges and judgeships. You have a lot to see here. Several videos. So there is an educational part on this website. So part of, teaching legal English is being able to show you where you can find authoritative sources of information. Because, the law is very vast, and you never know when you're going to need a term that you're not familiar with, or you need to learn about details about, be it the Supreme Court or, Article 3 judges. I'm going to explain to you what Article 3 judges are. So it's very important to have a reliable source. So I urge you to explore this webpage if you are interested, right, in doing so. Let me go back, but that's not it. I went back to the wrong page. Okay. It's not that. It's not that. Oh my God. Guys, just 1 second. Oh, I think I might have to. Do I have to backtrack? Yeah, I had to backtrack. I was never going to find my way. Okay, so now let's look at a comparative court structure. So, federal courts, Justiça Federal. And it's probably better to go from the first instance up to the Supreme Court. So, in the US federal justice system, you have district courts. In Brazil, we would call them primeira instância. Then, you have courts of appeal. In Brazil, we would call them Tribunal Regional Federal, os tribunais regionais federais. Then, here we have the Superior Tribunal de Justiça. There is no equivalent within the US federal justice system. Sorry. And finally, at the top of the federal court structure, you have the STF in Brazil, and you have the Supreme Court of the United States in the United States. Oh, let me take a look. I think you had some questions. We are going through the document called court structure, and I am detailing the different levels of the federal court structure in Brazil and in the US. Now, let's talk about court organization. So, court organization, organização judiciária. Circuit, na Justiça Federal Brasileira, equivaleria à região. Circuit. Aqui, a facilitação fonética para você. Circuit. Then we have judicial district. Na Justiça Brasileira, seção judiciária. Now, within the US, district courts are gathered into judicial districts. Courts of appeals are gathered into circuits. Regiões. There are 13 in total. And finally, you have the Supreme Court. Now, let's continue. Let's look at it comparatively. So, U.S. federal courts, Justiça Federal do Brasil. And we are going to go bottom up. Not top down, but bottom up. So, district courts are gathered into judicial districts. Primeira instância, seções judiciárias. Courts of appeal are gathered into circuits. In Brazil, Tribunal Regional Federal em suas regiões. And in the US, you go directly to the Supreme Court. In Brazil, STJ, STF. Now, let's talk a little bit about district courts. District courts are trial courts where you see both matters of law and matters of fact. And there are courts of first instance in the federal judiciary. There are 94 district courts. Judges presiding over district courts are called district judges. There are around 677 district judges in the US. Now we come to a false friend. Every time you see a word in red in one of my documents, it means that that word is a falso cognato ou falciane, ou termo que parece ser uma coisa, mas na verdade não é. A tradução não é correspondente em inglês. So, magistrate judges. Em português, o magistrado é um juiz, certo? É um juiz togado. Magistrate judges, they assist district judges in preparing cases for trial. They may also conduct trial and misdemeanor cases. Misdemeanor, contravenção. Contravenção. So, magistrate judges are judicial officers of the U.S. District Court appointed by district judges. And we saw that last class, the verb to appoint, or the noun, o substantivo appointment, or to be appointed, nomeado. Nomeado. By district judges of the court to handle a variety of judicial proceedings. To handle, para lidar com. To handle, para lidar com. And then, how long do they stay? Do they hold their position? By majority vote of the U.S. district judges of the court, magistrate judges are appointed for a renewable term of 8 years. So how are they appointed? They are appointed by district judges, and their term is o mandato de 8 anos. Term. Nesse caso, mandato. In addition, there are a small number of part-time magistrate judges who serve 4-year terms. And there are around 531 magistrate judges in the federal judiciary. 531. And we are going to see about, federal Article 3 federal judges. And you see how important that they are not as numerous. So that's why magistrate judges are so important within the federal justice system. Now, when we talk about the judicial districts, let's talk about the judicial districts of the 9th Circuit. Now, the 9th Circuit is always on the news in the US because there's a lot of tension going on there. You have California, which is a very progressive state, but then you have Alaska, for example, which is more conservative, and you have some other circuits really resenting the decisions that are, or the binding precedents that are adopted within the 9th Circuit. Continuing on, the word appeal. I'm going to appeal, or to file an appeal, recurso. Now, the word we are talking about at the beginning of the class, competência, jurisdiction. So, jurisdiction, a depender do contexto, competência ou jurisdição. To have jurisdiction over a case, ser competente para julgar o caso. To lack jurisdiction, ser incompetente para julgar um caso. And then subject matter jurisdiction, competência em razão da matéria. Subject, the subject, competência em razão da matéria. So, talking about the Court of Appeals, which would be equivalent to our TRFs. They are appellate courts divided into 13 circuits, 13 regiões. The circuits 1st through 11th, they are based in geographic areas, são baseados na geografia mesmo, 11 regiões geográficas. They hear appeals from district courts, meaning first instance courts, trial courts, within their borders. And then there are 2 remaining circuits. The DC Circuit, DC é District of Columbia, tá? O que a gente aqui chama de Washington. So, it covers the geographic area of DC, but it is very specialized in certain areas of law, particularly because it is the capital of the country. So, there are many agencies based in DC. So, they are particularly specialized in administrative, and watch out for the pronunciation, administrative law, and constitutional law. And then you have the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. It's very unique, okay? It's a jurisdiction, competência, entirely based on subject matter em razão da matéria, not on geographic location. So, nationwide jurisdiction to hear appeals in specialized cases. Oh. Guys, I'm seeing here that meu compartilhamento está pausado. Espera aí, interromper compartilhamento. Vou compartilhar de novo, gente. Perdão. Ai, gente, eu não tinha visto. Mil perdões. Vocês estão com os slides também? Não. Tá. Só o da semana passada, essa parte da matéria não. Tá bem, eu vou... Esther, tudo bem, Esther, pode compartilhar no final, sim. Desculpa, gente, eu não percebi que estava interrompido o meu compartilhamento. Deixa eu tentar resolver o problema. Espera aí. Vocês estão vendo agora... Agora eu acho que eu estou compartilhando. Está me falando aqui que eu estou compartilhando. Deixa eu voltar para o... aqui. Pronto. Cancelar. Eu não sei o que é isso aqui. Peraí. Cancelar. Perdão, Bruno.
Oi, Vanessa.
Oi, desculpa. Não, é que
Imagina.
apareceu um negócio aqui de AI, a cada hora uma coisa do Zoom, né? Falei que eu não queria compartilhar nada com Artificial Intelligence.
Tenta rolar o documento para baixo para ver se ele continua travado.
Deixa eu ver. Não, né? Vocês estão vendo rolar?
Não, tá travado no State Courts. O último que tá aparecendo é US State Courts. E a última palavra é competência, jurisdiction power.
Eita, ferro. Vocês têm alguma... Vou interrompi e vou começar de novo. Acabei de interromper, vou compartilhar.
Vê se você tá compartilhando a tela a janela do documento que você também tá rodando aí. Aí, ó. Agora sim.
Agora foi.
Isso.
Vou tentar rodar para baixo, tá, gente? Rodou?
Agora foi. Excelente,
Tá,
sim.
obrigada, gente. Desculpa, hein? So, So we are talking about the 13 circuits, que na Justiça Federal Americana há 13 regiões, right? First through 11th, they are geographic areas. Então, as regiões de 1 a 11 são baseadas na geografia. The two remaining circuits are the DC Circuit, que não deixa de ser, né, ter uma fronteira geográfica, but it is special because it hears a lot of administrative cases, administrative law cases, de direito administrativo, and also constitutional cases. And then Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. This is unique. It is unique. The jurisdiction, a competência, is entirely based on subject matter, em razão da matéria, not on the location. Okay? So, nationwide, it has nationwide jurisdiction to hear appeals in specialized cases, such as patentes, and cases decided by the U.S. Court of International Trade and the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. So here I have a map showing you the geographic boundaries of circuits 1 to 11. And before we were talking about the 9th circuit, a 9ª região da Justiça Federal Americana, which is always on the news because California tends to be very progressive on some areas. And then you have, Alaska, which is less progressive, and Montana, and there is a lot of politics involved within the federal justice system. Now, here we have just maps to compare the circuits, as regiões da Justiça Federal no Brasil, and the U.S. federal circuits. Let me... Ok. So, Esther, no final da aula, eu compartilho de novo os documentos. Eu tinha enviado pelo Zap. Mas se eu parar agora, né, vai perder um pouquinho o ritmo da aula. Pode ser? So, continuing. Some more vocabulary. So, the word judge, as we've seen, juiz, right? Judge. E aí, como se diz desembargador? It can be appellate judge or justice. Desembargador ou juiz de segunda instância, justice itself. E ministro do STF americano. Também muito poético, né? Justice. So, Justice Samuel Alito in the US, or Clarence Thomas in the US, or Justice Edson Fachin. And you can use the plural for, when you're talking about all of them or two of them. So, Supreme Court Justices. Não é ministro, gente, são ministros da Suprema Corte, tá? Faltou um Szinho aqui. Ministros da Suprema Corte. And then, Supremo Tribunal Federal, Federal Supreme Court, Superior Tribunal de Justiça, Superior Court of Justice. That's the suggested translation. Superior Court of Justice. Now here, I have, and I think you should try to do this at home once you've had time to look over all the vocabulary. For example, appellate judge, or, como é o outro nome que a gente acabou de ver, que se dá desembargador ou ministro, né, do Supremo Tribunal Federal ou a Supreme Court of the United States? Justice. So, Supreme Court of the United States, the judge title is Justice, right? And then here, the courts of appeal, appellate judge, or justice. And we saw how many circuits there are? 13. Circuits are regiões, right? And then district court, primeira instância, and the title is judge and divided into judicial districts. Now, federal judgeship. So, judgeship é o ser juiz, né? É o posto de juiz, judgeship. Federal judges are also known as Article 3 judges. Artigo 3º. Que artigo 3º é esse? Artigo 3º da Constituição Americana, tá? Article 3 of the Constitution governs the appointment, tenure, and payment of Supreme Court justices and Federal Circuit and District judges. You know, if you think of how small, succinct the American Constitution is, it's quite remarkable that it talks about federal judges. So let's look at some vocabulary so we can read the text. Again, false friends, false cognato, falciane, to nominate, indicar, to appoint, nomear, tenure for life, vitaliciedade, tenure for life, vitaliciedade, and retirement, aposentadoria. So, federal judges, Article 3 judges, are nominated by the president and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So they are first nominated, then they are confirmed by the Senate, and they are finally appointed by the president, right? Just as it happens in Brazil. They have tenure for life, which means they hold office during good behavior. And differently from Brazil, they do not have to retire. There is no mandatory retirement age. Não há idade para aposentadoria. As long as they are in good behavior, they can stay. They can stay on the bench. On the bench, ou seja, eles podem continuar trabalhando. They can be impeached through congressional proceedings. So, federal judges, which are Supreme Court justices, Federal Circuit justices, and district justices. Tenure for life, retirement. Now, vacancy, the word vacancy, vacância. Regardless, sem considerar independentemente. Caseload. A caseload é o volume de ações sob responsabilidade de juiz ou advogado. So, if you are a lawyer, you can say, I have a very heavy caseload. Eu tenho muitas ações sob a minha responsabilidade, muitos casos sob a minha responsabilidade. And then the U.S. Code. The U.S. Code, the United States Code, is a consolidation and codification by subject matter, em razão de matéria, of the general and permanent laws of the United States. A consolidação das leis federais dos Estados Unidos. We need this vocabulary to understand the text. I'm going to read now. So, federal judges, they have no mandatory retirement age. So, they can take senior status. Senior status is a form of semi-retirement, as set forth in Title 28 of the U.S. Code, Section 371. So, how can you achieve or how can you opt for senior status? You have to be at least 65 years old. And your age plus your years of service, they have to adapt to 80. Então, digamos, você tem que ter 65 anos de idade e no mínimo 15 anos de tempo de trabalho, somando 80. The minimum amount of time you can you should have worked is 10 years of service, regardless of your age. Então, digamos, se você tem 72 anos, mas só trabalhou 8 anos, você não vai poder, apesar de já ter mais, né, dessa soma ser maior que 80. Senior status, what happens when you acquire senior status? It allows judges, permite, to handle é lidar, to handle a reduced caseload, volume menor de ações, while receiving a full salary as an annuity. A senior status judge, even if retaining a full caseload, opens a vacancy on the court to be filled by the nomination and confirmation process for Article 3 judges. So what are we talking about here? So we saw that all federal judges are appointed by the US president, right? They are appointed by the US president. So you can imagine it is a political situation. So if a judge opts for senior status, another vacancy will open. The president will get to appoint, to nominate first and then appoint another federal judge. Judges are not required to take senior status since retirement is not mandatory. Retirement is not mandatory. Let's continue. So, a very interesting case happened last year. A judge who was 96 years old, 96, uma juíza de 96 anos, refused to opt for senior status, okay? And, you know, lots of considerations, lots of debate regarding this situation. Some claimed it was ageism, etarismo. And they were talking about her fitness, aptidão. And we're going to read an article. So these are the words that you need to know in order to understand the article. To mourn, lamentar. When you are in mourning, tá de luto. To handle, a gente já viu, lidar, caseload, volume de ações. Misconduct. We have to pay attention to this prefix, mis. It usually means that something is wrong. So, misconduct, má conduta, desvio de conduta. Mishandling, você não soube manusear ou tomar conta de algo. Mishandling. You mishandled the situation. Ok. Bench, dependendo do contexto, pode ser a cadeira do juiz, na sala de audiência, e pode ser a coletividade de juízes, né? A magistratura. One word that is often confused by Brazilians: politics and policy. So, politics, política, a política da vida, né? Digamos, política. O cenário político, politics. Policy é a política institucional. uma política pública ou a política de uma instituição. So, policy, política de conduta institucional, política pública. Now, very often, this is quite interesting to remark, to pay attention to. When you are talking about right, you are talking about direito subjetivo. When you are talking about the law, you're talking about direito objetivo. I find that quite interesting. As we were mentioning, federal judges have tenure for life, vitaliciedade, tenure for life, vitaliciedade. Os professores universitários também, they can also have tenure. It means que tem a cátedra, né? Ok. Retirement, aposentadoria, and senior status, we just saw all of that regarding senior status. I'm not going to repeat myself. Statute, do we recall what statute means? Lei promulgada pelo Poder Legislativo, right? Não é estatuto, tá? I don't even like to mention o falso cognato. I don't know what I did it right now. Statute, lei advinda do Poder Legislativo. Okay. So this is the case of the judge from a federal circuit. I urge you, if you have time, and here I have the link, Bloomberg Law. You can click on it. It's going to take you to the Instagram account, and you can follow this case. Let's take a quick look. Let me make, sorry here. Let me see if I can. I want to just increase the, oh. I think here, yeah. It's going to be quite hard then to read. Judge Newman, who just turned 96, mourns her legacy, o seu legado, legado, while saying she won't leave. Then, 96-year-old judge must mediate her dispute with Federal Circuit colleagues. Now, essa palavra aqui, dispute, is also a very, very important word. Dispute can mean litige. And then, finally, Federal Circuit panel votes to suspend Judge Pauline Newman's case assignments. Assignments são os casos que são atribuídos a ela, né? For a year. Now, continuing. I managed to, oh, here it is. Let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court of the United States. SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. Now, are you familiar with some other terms, such as POTUS? P-O, it's almost like we're talking about Harry Potter, right? It's not Harry Potter, it's just some of the acronyms used in the US. So SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, POTUS, President of the United States, and then FLOTUS, F-L-O-T-U-S, First Lady of the United States. So the establishment of the Supreme Court, Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution, establishes the Supreme Court, permits Congress to decide how to organize it. The Judiciary Act, let me increase the size because I don't think you're going to be able to read it. Is it better now? Permits Congress to decide how to organize it. So the Judiciary Act or statute, right? of 1789 created the Supreme Court with 6 justices. Então, quantos ministros havia? 6. Since 1869, the number of Supreme Court justices has been set at 9. So, the U.S. Supreme Court has 9 justices. So, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested into one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall at stated times, em momentos específicos, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So this is, the original text of the Constitution. It does say judicial power, but believe me, when you're talking about structure, use the term judicial branch. Judicial branch. The same way as we do not talk about inferior courts nowadays, right? We don't talk about inferior courts, judicial branch, and courts of first instance. So the Supreme Court structure. I'm not sure of how familiar you are with the Supreme Court justices, but here I have a picture of them for you. There is one Chief Justice and 8 associate justices. So let's take a look at the, I did not put a translation for you guys. But the Chief Justice é o ministro-presidente, and the other ones são os ministros. Now, differently from Brazil, the Chief Justice is not a rotation. When someone is appointed to the Supreme Court, if the vacancy for the Chief Justice is open, that person is appointed to the position of Chief Justice and remains permanently throughout their life. So the Chief Justice is appointed to the Supreme Court to fulfill this specific role permanently. So permanently. This differs from Brazil's Supreme Court, where Chief Justices are elected by their peers for 2 years, a two-year term. So a term of 2 years, com o S no final, or a 2-year term. Okay? The same way, a house that has 4 bedrooms, com S no final, 4 bedrooms, or a 4-bedroom house. Por quê? Porque adjetivo em inglês é invariável, né? That's why you don't add the S at the end. So here we have the names of the current justices, and we have, I also added who nominated them and whether they lean, se eles tendem à direita ou à esquerda, or liberal or conservative. So liberal in the US it means actually progressive, right? Quer dizer mais de esquerda. So this is the newest Supreme Court justice who was first nominated and then appointed by Biden. She is liberal. President Trump appointed Amy Coney, who is this other woman here, the blonde lady right here, who is a very conservative Catholic woman. Then Brett Kavanaugh, moderate, that's their reputation, right? reputation of being moderately conservative. Neil Gorsuch, conservative. Elena Kagan, liberal. A Latina, Sonia Sotomayor, who was also appointed by President Obama, and she is viewed as being the most liberal of the justices. Samuel Alito, who was nominated and appointed by President Bush, conservative. Roberts, conservative, and then Clarence Thomas. He was appointed by Bush Sr., the first Bush, not the second Bush, most conservative. So, how do you become a Supreme Court justice? You have the president's nomination. So, nomination quer dizer indicação. You just have to think of the Oscars, and the nominees are, e os indicados são, and then you have a Senate confirmation hearing, as follows, da seguinte forma. The Senate Committee on the Judiciary conducts confirmation hearings and sends the nomination to a full Senate, para o plenário, along with a recommendation. Positive, negative, or none, no recommendation. Then the full Senate approves the nomination by a simple majority. Now, in case of a tie, what is a tie? Empate. The vice president, who is also the president of the Senate, breaks the tie. Então, em caso de empate, quem decide é o presidente do Senado, que nos Estados Unidos é o vice-presidente. So, to break a tie. By the way, tie can mean 3 things off the top of my head, que eu consiga me lembrar agora, né? A tie, um empate, a tie, uma gravata, and to tie something, amarrar algo, right? So, after the president nominates and the nominee is confirmed by the Senate, you have the formal appointment by the president. You have the formal appointment by the president. The president formally appoints the person to the position of Supreme Court Justice. E eu tinha esquecido como dizer desempatar. To break a tie, desempatar. So, another question. Are there professional or natural-born citizenship requirements for Supreme Court justices? I'm looking here. So, no. Tem que ser cidadão nato? No. And are there professional requirements? Também não. 6 justices were born outside the United States. E aqui você tem o nome, e o último, o mais recente deve ter sido na década de 50 ou 40. Aparentemente tinha nascido na Áustria. Now, something that's quite interesting, clerking. So, law clerk, assessor jurídico, tá? Law clerk. Several current justices, atuais, current justices, previously clerked for Supreme Court justices. I find this very interesting. So, and here we have, Roberts clerked for Justice William Rehnquist, Elena Kagan, aqui ela é bem liberal, clerked for Thurgood Marshall, que não está mais na Suprema Corte, Neil Gorsuch, clerked for Anthony Kennedy, Brett Kavanaugh, clerked for Anthony Kennedy, Amy Coney, a que foi indicada pelo Trump, clerked for Justice Antonin Scalia. Have you guys heard of Justice Antonin Scalia? he was probably the most conservative justice in recent history. Antonin Scalia. And then Ketanji Brown Jackson clerked for Justice Stephen Breyer. Justice Gorsuch is the first to have served as a member of the court alongside a justice for whom he clerked. So, o Justice Gorsuch foi o primeiro que fez parte da Suprema Corte juntamente com o ministro para o qual ele foi assistente. And that finishes our part on the federal court system. Now, we can go on to the state court system. Do you guys need 5 minutes? I can go on, but if you would like, I can give you 5 minutes to drink a glass of water. What do you think? Esther, o que você acha? 5 minutinhos para as pessoas poderem beber um copo d'água ou a gente segue? Guys, I guess I'm just gonna... Oh, seu compartilhamento está pausado. Interromper compartilhamento. Pode seguir? Beleza, vou seguir. Não, vou seguir. Só vou compartilhar aqui de novo, que acho que quando eu saio da tela, eu clico em alguma coisa que dá ruim aqui. Espera aí. Ok. So, guys, now let's talk about the state court system. Ok? Vamos lá, state courts. State courts, justiça estadual. Now, limited jurisdiction, competência limitada. Superior Court, primeira instância da justiça estadual. Aqui, gente, vou avisar, a nomenclatura é complicada. É complicada porque ela é diferente dependendo do estado, tá? Tem que prestar um pouquinho de atenção e sempre tem que pesquisar, não tem jeito. Misdemeanor, contravenção. Local ordinances, posturas, leis municipais. Petty no inglês coloquial não, no inglês não técnico, né? Petty quer dizer mesquinho, pequeno. Petty offenses são normalmente contravenções. In most states, petty offenses are generally less serious than misdemeanors and often involve minor violations of local ordinances or regulations. Então, na verdade, eu me corrijo aqui. Não são contravenções, são infrações, normalmente. Pequenas infrações. Então, petty, pequeno, trivial, mesquinho. Now, a very interesting term, petty cash. Anyone who's worked in the US, or especially in the past, you had a little box where you had petty cash, which are small amounts of money to pay for unforeseen expenses. Inesperadas, né? Para imprevistos. So a petty cash fund is a small amount of company cash, often kept on hand, example, in a locked drawer or a box, to pay for minor or incidental expenses, such as office supplies or employee reimbursements. E aqui, de novo, gente, a palavra power, competência, tá? E competência, outra maneira de traduzir, além de power, jurisdiction, right? Eu estava procurando aqui umas anotações que eu fiz. Here it is. So, for example, taxing power. the state's taxing power, a state taxing power, a particular state's taxing power. Competência tributária do Estado. Competência tributária, o poder que aquele Estado tem de tributar. And that's why, you know, like legislative power, o poder que você tem de legislar, né? Poder de legislar. Competência legislativa. So, be careful of the word. I mean, be careful when using the word power. Do not use the word power when you want to talk about the three branches of government, okay? So, state courts, U.S. state courts, justiça estadual. So, first thing, a disclaimer, aviso, né? Uma ressalva. There is a great diversity. I'm going to try to increase the text for you guys. There is a great diversity of state court structures and designations within the United States, as each state is free to structure its own judiciary. An additional difference between the state judiciary in the US and Brazil is that US state court systems may create municipal courts of limited jurisdiction to handle smaller or local matters. Ou seja, a justiça estadual pode estruturar juízos municipais, tá? Here is the University of Cornell's Legal Information Institute. By the way, I advise you to often refer to the University of Cornell's Legal Information Institute. They have great, let me see if I provided the link. I did. Tá aqui o link. Também aconselho vocês, quando queiram investigar, explorar terminologia, podem consultar o Cornell Legal Institute. So here is the University of Cornell's Legal Information Institute explanation of municipal courts. Gente, só um instantinho. Municipal courts are often a base level in state court systems. They are typically courts of limited jurisdiction, né? Competência restrita. With authority over matters such as misdemeanor. Quem lembra o que é misdemeanor? Misdemeanor, contravenção. Or petty offenses committed in the city or township. The rules governing the functioning of municipal courts are prescribed by state statutes and thus, therefore, thus é uma outra maneira de dizer therefore, consequentemente, and thus vary state to state. Now, guys, what does this mean here? Prescribed by state statutes. State statutes seria o quê? State statutes, lei estadual. Lei estadual. State statute. Lei estadual. Tá? Não é statute, não traduz literalmente para o português, pelo som. Se traduzir pelo som, vai traduzir errado. It is fair to point out, when something is fair, something is just. And by definition, it is correct, right? So it is fair to point out, indicar, nonetheless, apesar de tudo, that state court structures tend to replicate the federal court system. So they tend to replicate the state court system. Below is the most common state court structure. Então, vamos ver a estrutura mais recorrente, né? Na justiça estadual nos Estados Unidos. You have the superior courts that are... Isso aqui eu vou falar no final. So, you have the superior courts, the trial courts. É primeira instância, mas é chamada superior. Just live with it. There's nothing I can do. That's the name. Then you have the State Court of Appeals, a segunda instância, and then you have the State Supreme Court, which is different, right, from us. They do have, each state has its own State Supreme Court. And as we just saw, each state can enact statute creating municipal courts of limited jurisdiction, Now, it begs the question, is there a counterpart to the Brazilian National Council of Justice, CNJ, in the United States? And what do you think? Knowing the way the US is, less centralized, do you think there is? No. In the US, each state court systems operates independently and is subject to its own laws and regulations. There is no entity or organization with a role, com papel, similar to the Brazilian CNJ's oversight and administration of the judicial system at a national level. There are, however, collaborative efforts for the improvement of court systems across the states. Então, o que há são collaborative efforts, né? São iniciativas de colaboração para a melhoria dos sistemas estaduais. One word here is quite interesting, oversight. Oversight quer dizer, nesse sentido aqui, supervisão. Oversight, supervisão. But oversight can also mean a mistake, something that you missed. I'm sorry for my oversight. I forgot to send you the material. I'm sorry for my oversight. Eu poderia dizer desculpa pelo oversight, como se fosse algo que escapou da sua atenção, né? So it can mean both things depending on the situation, okay? Anyhow, so there is no equivalent, no counterpart to CNJ within the United States. There is, however, an organization called COSCA, the Conference of State Court Administrators, that was established in 1955 as a collaborative platform where state court administrations share information, okay? And they did create a court statistics project. Why am I talking about all of this? Why am I talking about this? I mean, what's the purpose? Porque esse projeto deles é uma fonte muito interessante de informação sobre a justiça estadual nos Estados Unidos. Então, seja por um fim acadêmico, ou só realmente porque você quer conhecer a estrutura de cada estado. Obviamente, você pode fazer, né, um Google e procurar lá. Montana State System, Idaho Judicial Branch. Court system, I'm sorry, Idaho court system. Mas this website has everything compiled and they compare and contrast. Eles têm várias análises comparativas. It's very, very interesting. And this is an exercise that we are going to skip. Let's look at some words. So, general jurisdiction, competência plena para julgar qualquer tipo de caso. Limited jurisdiction, competência limitada para julgar apenas algumas matérias. Subject matter jurisdiction, a gente viu isso no começo da aula, competência em razão da matéria. Court of last resort, último recurso, né? Quem eu recorro por último. última instância. Disputes, to dispute, lide. Felony, crime estrito sensu. Arbiters, árbitros. Appellate court structure. So, the appellate court structure é a estrutura recursal. Now, if something is high stakes, for example, a high stakes case, it means that it's a case of high importance, either because it's politically important or because it is financially important, right? So, de alto risco, de grande importância. Now, very important word, remedy, plural remedies. Tutela, provimento judicial, medida judicial, tutela jurisdicional, prestação jurisdicional. Two-tier appellate system, sistema recursal com duplo grau de jurisdição, and route or route. Você pode escolher a maneira que você quer pronunciar, route or route, rota ou caminho. So, these words are here because they relate to this web page here, where you are going to and to the captions of, see here they explain the appellate structure, the type of criminal process or trial court structure, if it's single tier. Tier quer dizer quantas instâncias, né? Se tem tier são camadas. Então, aqui no caso seria uma instância, duas instâncias, né? So you can click here and you can explore a lot. You can check whether, the state has death penalty, pena capital, or their structure, how many instances there are, if they have, if their Supreme Court, if they have one Supreme Court or two Supreme Courts. Some states have a Supreme Court to analyze criminal matters and a Supreme Court to analyze civil matters. So it's quite detailed. It's a great resource, this web page. So let's compare. I need to reduce the size a little bit. Let's compare the structure of the state court structure for California and Florida, for example. California is quite straightforward, right? Superior, lembra que Superior Court são o juízo de primeira instância, são chamados de Superior. Court of Appeal, segunda instância, and Supreme Court. Florida, a little bit different. E aí, realmente, só lendo sobre a especificidade de cada estado. Now, look at Texas. You see, they have municipal system, and then they have district courts. They have, if I can remember, I think they have probate. It's probably for, I want to say that probate here is for sucessão. Not 100% sure though, because it can have different meanings, but probate usually is related to wills, vara de sucessão, usually, but I'm not sure if that's I can't remember if this is the case in Texas, okay? It's not, it can mean several things, probate. Court of Appeals, and then here you see if it's a criminal matter, they have one Supreme Court to analyze criminal matters, so Court of Criminal Appeals, and then they have Supreme Court for civil matters. And this is the glossary for so that you can read the details of each case. Now, look at this. President Donald Trump to take the stand in New York civil trial, and he is at... Deixa eu tentar abrir aqui, aumentar aqui para ver se dá para ler. Here. Former President Trump Center waits to take the witness stand at New York Supreme Court. New York Supreme Court. Então, o processo dele já chegou à Suprema Corte de Nova York? Do estado de Nova York? Actually not. It hasn't. Because the New York Supreme Court is a trial level court. Então, a primeira instância da Justiça Estadual de Nova York é chamada de Suprema Corte, Supreme Court of New York. It's quite almost silly, right? The highest appellate court is New York Court of Appeals. Então, a Suprema Corte no estado de Nova York é denominada New York Court of Appeals. Okay? Very, very confusing. Now, I also added here, just so you know, a listing of all Supreme Courts by state, the number of justices they comprise, the way they are selected, the justices are selected, and the term, o mandato, for each justice. And you're going to see here, it's really, you know, very varied. It depends from state to state. And here's the link where you can explore more if you want. So finally, let's take, I think we still have some moments. Let's compare the Brazilian state court system, a Justiça Estadual, né, and US state courts. And as I put here, most common, okay? It varies. So this is just the most common. Outra vez, vamos começar de baixo para cima. First instance, Superior Court. Tribunal de Justiça, State Court of Appeals. E, nos Estados Unidos, State Supreme Court. Now let's talk about state court organization, organização judiciária, right? And then here again, a disclaimer. Remember, both structure and denominations vary across the states. Muda de estado a estado, tá? So, gente, peraí, volta. Superior Court, primeira instância, né? Most common designation, is organized into counties. And also this is varied, so tudo é variável. But, you know, I'm just giving you the most common. Court of Appeal or Appellate Court, in some states it can be called districts or divisions. And then the State Supreme Court. Now a comparative analysis. So Superior Court or divided into counties in Brazil, primeira instância, comarcas. Como é que se chama a segunda instância? Second instance or higher courts, Court of Appeal or Appellate Court. So, districts or divisions, Tribunal de Justiça e núcleos regionais. Pelo menos aqui, pelo menos eu acho que na nossa região se chama núcleo regional. And then the Supreme Court in the US. And that's pretty much it for the Supreme Court. Obviously, no curso eu tenho vários exercícios, vários artigos, but, you know, to do them in this format would be very, very very boring for you guys, because I would not be able to drill you, fazer perguntas e puxar a informação, né, como eu gosto. I do believe I can talk about the term bar. Do you know how to say qual seria o equivalente à OAB americana? And I just have to find my text first. Just 1 second. Here it is. Here you go. So, o equivalente à OAB nos Estados Unidos seria a American Bar Association, roughly, okay? There are differences because the licensing and laws regarding licensing in the US, they happen at the state level. So the American Bar Association at a national level, they lobby for the profession and they set guidelines, ethical guidelines for lawyers, but they are not regulators, okay? So the state bar is the regulatory body or organization that oversees the practice of law in specific US states. So here I put some of them for you. I've listed some of them for you. New York State Bar, State Bar of California, DC Bar. Now, o exame da ordem, como se diz em inglês? Bar exam. Bar exam. E como é que se fala? Vou fazer o exame da ordem. I'm going to sit for the bar. Sit for the bar. I'm going to sit for the bar. Eita. Espera aí, gente, que alguma coisa que eu clico que faz parar, mas eu vou voltar. Espera aí. Compartilhar. Voltei. Now. To sit for the bar. Now, to disbar means to lose your license, to take the license away from a lawyer. So to expel from the bar, to take away a lawyer's license to practice law. Excluir da ordem dos advogados. So to disbar, and the act itself is called disbarment, the act of taking away your license. This will never happen to any of us, God forbid. God forbid that, one of us is disbarred. We will not be disbarred. Não vamos ter a suspensa a carteira, né? So here you have some articles. For example, Michael Cohen has been disbarred in New York. Has been disbarred in New York. President Donald Trump's former lawyer and fixer. Fixer is someone who takes care of business for someone. Michael Cohen was disbarred in New York after pleading guilty for lying to Congress about a plan for a Trump Tower project in Moscow. So he has been disbarred. Teve a sua carteira da ordem suspensa. To disbar, to deny, to bar. You can bar someone. If you bar someone from doing something or from entering a place, it means that you are not allowing them to enter a place. You are denying access to them. And why do you think, você notou que todas as palavras têm o bar, né? Disbar, né? Bar. So the term of the use bar in legal contexts, why is it used, right? Here. The use of the term bar in legal contexts dates back to medieval England. Gente, só um instantinho. Dates back to medieval England. In the early days of English courts, a bar, a physical barrier or railing, separated the area reserved for the judge, lawyers, and court officials from the general public. Então, aqui, uma divisória que, desde a Idade Média, separa o advogado e os advogados, juízes, do público, In other words, lawyers who were qualified to represent clients in court were allowed to pass the bar. Eles podiam, né, os advogados então podiam transpor aquela divisória, aquela barreira, and enter the space reserved for legal professionals. As time went by, the term bar came to symbolize the legal profession itself and the collective body of lawyers who are qualified to practice the law in a particular jurisdiction. Então, the bar quer dizer, ao mesmo tempo, a profissão e a coletividade de profissionais, né? E também a instituição profissional, né? The professional organization. So basically, I guess for today, I think we've seen enough. You're probably very tired. I hope it was interesting. There is an exercise here, but I think we can leave it for you to do at home. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. I actually did not provide. Oh, I'm seeing that I didn't provide. Não tem gabarito esse exercício. Então, vamos fazer agora, rapidinho? Eu acho melhor. Só são 6 frases. To become, so here are the words. Barristers, a gente viu na aula passada que os barristers são aqueles advogados ingleses que são especializados em sustentarem juízo, né? To plead cases. To sit for the bar, disbarred, bar exam, disbarment, the word bar 3 times, and license to practice law. So let's try it. To become a licensed attorney in the United States, law school graduates must... What do you have to do? So these are the words. Você tem que passar o exame da ordem, né? Então, sit for the bar. Must sit for the bar. Sit for the bar. Now, number 2. After years of practice, the unethical behavior of the attorney led to his blah, 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 resulting in the loss of the... So it led to his disbarment. And as I go, I am going to highlight the words. To his disbarment. And sit for the bar. Resulting in the loss of the o que ele perdeu? License to practice law. Now, in the early days of the English courts, A separated the area reserved for the judge, lawyers, and court officials. Uma barra, né? The bar. From the general public. Nowadays, the term bar is used to designate a collective body of lawyers who are qualified to practice law in a particular jurisdiction. Number 4. So we already have bar twice. Number 4, in the UK, this type of lawyer or this type of lawyers have full rights of audience in all courts. Barristers. They can indeed pass the bar without restrictions. Eles realmente podem ultrapassar a divisória, né? Sem nenhuma restrição. So, after years of preparation, she passed the bar exam. And became a licensed attorney. And finally, the law firm found out that the lawyer responsible for the contract has been blah, blah, since 2019, due to multiple instances of professional misconduct. Então, ele tinha perdido, né, a licença. a carteirinha da ordem. So disbarred. He has been disbarred. And that's the end of our exercise. And I do believe we did all the... Eu acho que nós usamos todas as palavras, né? Eu que não marquei aqui. She lost her license to practice law. Yes. So guys, this is it. There are some exercises. Let me know if you have any questions. I will be very happy to answer them. Okay? You can send them the questions to Esther, and then Esther will be able to forward them to me. Thank you so much. I hope it was useful. It is a lot of information, but you have everything written down in the documents. Tá bem, gente? Muito obrigada, boa noite, até a aula que vem, que vai ser sobre Criminal Law, Direito Penal. Tchauzinho.